Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about Into the Raging Sea by Rachel Slade. 33 mariners, one megastorm, and the sinking of El Faro. I am near the water. I'm in a bit of a lee. There is some wind, so hopefully you can't hear that. And yes, I do have new glasses. Thank you for noticing. This is a hard book to read because I'll explain why it's hard to read. It's great. It's great. 5 stars. I really thought that it was instructive and great to read. It's sad what happens in it. So this happens in 2015, very end of September, very beginning of October, and it is the sinking of a 790-foot ship, the El Faro. Originally it was created in I think the 60s as a ramp, like a cargo ship, but one that you had a ramp for that you would drive stuff on really quickly. This is before ports really started having the huge cranes. At this point, the bet was that if you could just drive on really quickly and offload your cargo, it would be better for commercial interests. Eventually, the whole situation changes in shipping, and the need for these big containers that are standardized comes out, and El Faro is reconfigured. Initially, it was working out of Alaskan waters, but it moves to Jacksonville. Well, actually, I think it moves to maybe Baltimore or Boston. Baltimore, a B word. Philadelphia? That's not B. I don't know. Somewhere decent size. I think it was Baltimore. Where it's kind of being refitted and some changes made to it and whatever. Eventually its sister ship is decommissioned and it takes over this route from Jacksonville to Puerto Rico. And it's a very valuable route. It's done through a company called Tote, and that's kind of where we are at the beginning of the story. We do get like these chapters where you look back at where people came from. A lot of Merchant Marine Academy or Maine Maritime or Mass Maritime Academy or SUNY Maritime graduates are involved here, and you kind of get these little look backs at where they came from and their kind of history. And you do get also a little bit of background into the shipping company, shipping issues in general, but the shipping company and it's kind of moved from where was it originally? Was it New England, maybe? That doesn't sound right. To Jacksonville, but then the headquarters was moved to, I think, actually now I'm totally blanking. It's been 2 days or so since I finished this. At some point, some of the people were out of Washington State, so pretty far away from where the action was. But they also had other stuff going on, maybe Seattle or Tacoma or something. They also had other Bainbridge Island. I don't know now. I forgot stuff. The shipping company wasn't just working out of the East Coast. They also had stuff on the West Coast, and they were working on upgrading their fleet from these steamships to LNG powered ships, liquefied natural gas powered ships. So we start late September, and there's a storm system that started off the Canary Islands and it's moving across the Atlantic, and we get this kind of explanation on the different forecasting systems out there, including the National Hurricane Center and this service, I think it was called BVS, but it was a service that kind of integrates your tracking, current speeds, the seas, different weather reports, so you could track where you were going and where the storm was and kind of plan out where you wanted to be when a storm was somewhere. So they're going from Jacksonville to Puerto Rico, and they're traveling along, I think, the eastern side of the Bahamas. And the issue there is they're relatively deep draft, not a huge ship, 790 feet compared to ships now, but a deep draft ship, and they're really constrained by the seas around them, and the Bohemian area is relatively shallow, so they kind of have areas where they can pull out of their transit, but there's also a lot of natural barriers just because of the depth in that area. So they're monitoring the storm, and they're getting a lot of conflicting data. And one of the things that they think is going to happen is that what becomes Hurricane Joaquin is going to head west and then turn and go up towards the east coast. And the captain of El Faro, Davidson, thinks that if they can just run fast, they can get to the bottom edge of the storm and be south of it towards Puerto Rico as the storm's turning north. So they're gonna skip ahead of it. And that's kind of his approach, but other people are nervous about it because you're kind of relying on everything working out perfectly. They're kind of passing up areas where they can turn off, and the hope is that they'll make it ahead of the storm. But the thing is, if they don't, they can either turn into shoal water near the Bahamas, or they can turn into the storm. And there's not really a lot of other options to them if things don't work out perfectly. They're also, we figure out they're using old data. That the system that the National Hurricane Center uses is, I think, about 4 or 5 hours old, because they have to have all the data inputted and then have an actual forecast and have it reviewed by the meteorologist. The other system they're using, that the captain more heavily relies on because of the graphic kind of interface, I think it's called BVS, that system is even more stale. I think it's like 12 hours delayed, because not only are they taking the National Hurricane Center information, which is, as we know, already delayed by 4 or 5 hours, they're also inputting their own stuff, and that delays it even further. So by the time their report comes, it's really late. And if you're basing all of your information off of that, you're basically 12 hours behind. And for a storm system that's pretty erratic, that can be all the difference. So much changes within 12 hours, 24 hours, that you just don't know. And that's what they were doing. They were kind of hoping for the best and not planning for the worst. And then they got caught with the storm. They were using faulty data. Even the track forecasts were off. And where they thought that they were going to be able to, or where some of them thought, really just the captain, because everyone else was really getting nervous, where they thought that they could pull out or get ahead of it, they were actually driving straight into the storm. And that's what they did. So by October 1st, they are basically in the eye wall of, I think it was category 3 or 4 at that point. And then they dropped off. People couldn't contact them. There was this listening system that the US government has, and they heard a thump, which ended up being the El Faro basically plowing into the seabed. There was a long, huge search for El Faro, and eventually they found the site on the seabed and figured out that the black box was there. And they actually had about 26, I think it was, hours of audio from the bridge of the ship leading up to when it sank. The system writes over itself. So you have the most recent stuff that would happen, but not weeks back unless it was broken. And you know, a lot of times the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, has information that's, you know, a couple hours maybe of recordings. This was, or minutes. This was 26 hours, the whole lead up, discussions on the bridge about what they were going to do, what the storm was looking like, what the options were, what their decisions were, even discussions between people that were on watch when the captain wasn't around, and the nerves behind that. And I think that's what was really chilling about this book, was all of the dialogue in the book was based off of and from those audio files from the black box. So you really heard the discussion leading up to the loss of the entire ship. And ships this size are not lost all the time. It's fairly rare to lose all hands. The last time that it happened in the US in peacetime was the Marine Electric, sinking, which I have done a review on, the book that covers that. So check that out right here. So it's fairly rare within U.S. ships, and here is a time where it happened, and you got to hear the crew and the officers and what was happening right before. And I think it was very eerie to think about. The audio has never been released. The transcripts have, but just hearing the destruction right as they were realizing that they were going to have to abandon ship in a hurricane, and how terrifying that would be. You also get in the book discussion on the investigations, the Coast Guard investigations, including some of the background into the people that were involved with the rescue attempts or the searches, and the investigation, and the board that was set up to review what happened. You get a look into the company and company's leadership. You get a look into some of the safety issues that ships had at that time, and specific to this ship, and also things they're looking for when they're doing inspections of ships. And a look for the cases where they're looking at who was at fault here. Was it the commanding officer of the ship, the captain? Was it the shipping company, which I felt like had some serious issues too? I did feel like after reading it that really a lot of the poor decision making was on the captain, but there were definitely situations that were made much worse by the way the shipping company tote had handled their fleet, and there was fault to pass around. Just a horrible story. 33 people died. One body was found but then lost because they couldn't pick him up at the time. They were still trying to rescue other people, and by the time they would have been able to come back and find that body, which was definitely dead at that point, they couldn't find the body again. So there were debris fields, there was an oil slick. Eventually they found the entire structure and were able to figure out what happened. It looks like, somebody could have left the hatch open, but also where they have these vents for the different spaces that need to be ventilated because of the risk of gases being built up in them, especially when the ship was changed, when it was refitted. That changed the engineering of the ship and how stable it was, and where things were being loaded on the ship, that also changed the stability of the ship. If things came untied or where they started losing containers, that changes the stability too. So there was a look into that, but also how did water eventually get into the holds and what kept it from being contained. And I think it's just a really interesting, thorough look at a major incident and the history behind it before, and what came out on basically October 2nd, 2015, and a pretty major incident with a large loss of life, 33 people. So, Into the Raging Seas, Rachel Slade did a great job, and I recognize some of the names from the Coast Guard, but this is not a lot. So check it out. It's really well done, and it is a notable book of the year from the New York Times book review. This was published in 2018, and I finally read it, and I thought it was a great read and a sad story. So thanks for being here today. I will talk to you later. Have a good one.